The emergency beacon's piercing wail echoed through the corridors of Research Station Kepler 442b, cutting through the artificial atmosphere like a knife through silence. Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the cool metal bulkhead, feeling the subtle vibrations that shouldn't be there. 3 years of monitoring this distant world had taught her to read every tremor, every shift in the station's rhythm. This wasn't mechanical failure. "Marcus, are you seeing this?" She called to her research partner, her voice tight with controlled urgency. Dr. Marcus Chen looked up from the spectral analysis display, his dark eyes reflecting the amber warning lights that had begun pulsing throughout their laboratory. "The atmospheric readings are impossible," he said, his usual calm demeanor cracking slightly. "The composition changed by 15% in the last hour. That doesn't happen naturally." Elena moved to the main observation deck, her boots clicking against the deck plating with mechanical precision. Through the reinforced transparasteel, the alien landscape of Kepler 442b stretched before them. The purple-tinted vegetation swayed in patterns that seemed almost too organized, too purposeful. She had studied xenobiology for 12 years, but nothing in her training had prepared her for what she was witnessing. "The plants are moving in coordination," she whispered, more to herself than to Marcus. "Look at the grove near the eastern ridge. They're turning towards something." Marcus joined her at the observation port, his tablet clutched in one hand while he adjusted his glasses with the other. "Elena, I need you to look at this data stream from the orbital sensors. The electromagnetic signature we've been tracking isn't getting weaker. It's getting stronger, and it's not coming from space." The implications hit her like a physical blow. For 3 years, they had assumed the strange energy readings were remnants of some cosmic phenomenon, perhaps residual radiation from a distant stellar event. The possibility that the signals originated from the planet itself had never seriously been considered. Kepler 442b was supposed to be uninhabited, a garden world perfect for future human colonization. "Run a full spectrum analysis on everything," Elena ordered, her scientific training overriding the growing knot of anxiety in her stomach. "I want to know what we're dealing with before we report back to Earth." The next 6 hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Marcus worked with the precision of a surgeon, his fingers dancing across multiple interfaces as he pulled data from every sensor array on the station. Elena coordinated with the automated survey drones, directing them to investigate the areas showing the most unusual activity. Neither scientist spoke about the growing certainty that they were no longer alone on Kepler 442b. The breakthrough came at 3:47 hours station time. Marcus suddenly went rigid at his workstation, his face pale in the glow of his monitors. "Elena, you need to see this immediately." She crossed the laboratory in 3 quick strides, looking over his shoulder at the cascade of data streaming across his screens. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. The electromagnetic patterns weren't random cosmic noise. They were structured, complex, and undeniably artificial. More than that, they showed clear signs of intelligence. "This is language," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not just communication, but sophisticated language with grammatical structures, mathematical concepts, and what appears to be emotional context." Elena sank into the chair beside him, her mind racing through the implications. How long have they been transmitting? Based on the signal's strength progression, at least 18 months, maybe longer. Marcus pulled up a 3-dimensional representation of the signal sources. "Elena, they're not just on the planet, they're everywhere. Underground networks, atmospheric transmission nodes, even what appears to be orbital relays we somehow missed." The silence that followed was broken only by the steady hum of the station's life support systems. Elena stared at the display, watching the pulsing nodes of alien communication that surrounded their tiny human outpost like a vast, invisible web. The realization that they had been observed for months, perhaps years, while believing themselves to be the observers was profoundly unsettling. "We need to establish communication," she said finally. "If they know we're here, silence isn't going to help us." Marcus nodded slowly, already beginning to work on the problem. "I can modify our communication array to match their primary frequency range. But Elena, what if they don't want to talk? What if our presence here is seen as hostile?" Before she could answer, every screen in the laboratory flickered and went dark. The emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Then, slowly, the screens came back online, but instead of their familiar data displays, they showed something else entirely. Images began flowing across their monitors. Not the crude pictographs one might expect from first contact protocols, but sophisticated visual representations that demonstrated a deep understanding of human psychology and communication methods. The first image showed their research station from an external perspective, but viewed from an angle no human surveillance equipment could achieve. The second showed detailed schematics of their equipment, accurate down to the smallest component. "They've been watching us," Marcus said unnecessarily. "They know exactly what we are and what we're capable of." The third image made them both gasp. It showed Alina and Marcus inside the laboratory, rendered with photographic accuracy, but the representation included details no external observer should know. Their vital signs, emotional states, even what appeared to be their individual psychological profiles were displayed alongside their images. "How is this possible?" Alina asked, though she suspected the answer would be troubling. The screens shifted again, showing what could only be described as a history lesson. Images of Earth appeared, showing human civilization from orbit, major population centers, technological infrastructure, and military installations. The alien observers had not limited their surveillance to Kepler 442b. They had been studying humanity itself. Marcus stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. "Alina, this isn't first contact. This is reconnaissance. They've been gathering intelligence on our entire species." The final series of images was the most disturbing. They showed other worlds, other species, and what had happened to them when they encountered whatever civilization was now studying humanity. Some worlds showed signs of devastating conflict. Others appeared simply empty. Their civilizations vanished without a trace. A few showed species that seemed to have been fundamentally altered, their technology and biology integrated with systems that were clearly not of their own design. "They're showing us what they can do," Alina realized. "This is a demonstration of power." As if responding to her words, the screens went black again. When they returned to normal function, a new message appeared, this time in perfect English. The translation capabilities these beings possessed were clearly far beyond anything humans had achieved. "We have observed your species with great interest," the message read. "Your expansion into our region of space was anticipated. Your research station has provided valuable data about human psychology, technology, and social structures. We compliment your dedication to scientific inquiry, even when conducted in ignorance of your true situation." Alina and Marcus exchanged glances, both recognizing the subtle threat underlying the polite language. The message continued. "Humanity has reached a critical juncture. Your species demonstrates remarkable adaptability and technological innovation, but also shows concerning patterns of aggression and territorial expansion. We have observed similar patterns in other species. The outcomes have varied considerably." "What do they want from us?" Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure if the question would be answered. New text appeared almost instantly. "We require a demonstration of your species' wisdom and restraint. Your governments are currently planning military expeditions to this system, believing it to be uninhabited and available for colonization. This assumption is incorrect. How your species responds to this knowledge will determine the nature of our future relationship." Alina felt her heart racing. "They know about the colony ships." "The vessels you call New Horizon Fleet departed Earth 6 months ago," the message confirmed. "They carry military escorts and terraforming equipment intended to prepare this system for human habitation. Their arrival is expected in 14 months. We are curious to see how humanity will proceed when faced with the reality of our presence." Marcus was frantically checking the communications logs. "Alina, we're cut off. They've somehow blocked our quantum entanglement communicator. We can't warn Earth about any of this." "That is correct," appeared on screen. "This test requires that your species face the situation without preparation or outside assistance. You too will serve as humanity's representatives during this critical period. Your choices and actions will influence our assessment of your species' potential." The weight of responsibility settled on Alina's shoulders like a physical burden. Two scientists, alone on an alien world, had somehow become the bridge between humanity and a civilization of unknown capabilities and intentions. "We're willing to serve as representatives," she said aloud, hoping they were still being monitored. "But we need to understand what's expected of us." New images began flowing across the screens, showing the local alien civilization for the first time. The beings were unlike anything in human imagination. They appeared to exist partially in normal space and partially in dimensions human science couldn't yet comprehend. Their technology was seamlessly integrated with biological systems, creating a form of existence that transcended the traditional boundaries between natural and artificial. "We are what your species might call evolved," the message explained. "Our civilization has existed for approximately 847,000 of your years. We have encountered 2,847 spacefaring species in our expansion across this galaxy. Of these, 312 demonstrated sufficient wisdom to be granted continued autonomous existence. 1,203 required integration into our collective consciousness to prevent them from becoming a threat to galactic stability. The remainder chose conflict and were eliminated." Elena swallowed hard. "And what determines which category a species falls into?" "The ability to recognize their limitations and accept their place in the larger galactic community," came the reply. "Species that attempt to expand beyond their capabilities, that demonstrate persistent aggression, or that show inability to coexist with more advanced civilizations face consequences appropriate to the threat they represent." Marcus had been quietly working at his station throughout the exchange. Now he looked up with an expression of mixed fear and determination. "Elena, I've been analyzing the energy signatures around the planet. They're not just monitoring us. They're conducting some kind of large-scale experiment." "Dr. Chen is observant," appeared on the screens. "This world serves multiple purposes for our civilization. It is both a research facility and a testing ground. The various ecosystems you have studied represent controlled environments where we observe how different biological and technological systems interact under stress." "You're studying us the way we study lab animals," Elena said, the realization bringing a mixture of humiliation and anger. "The analogy is not entirely inaccurate, though it lacks nuance," the response came. "Your species has potential that interests us. Human adaptability and creative problem-solving abilities are notable, even by our standards. However, your aggressive tendencies and inability to cooperate effectively with your own species remain concerning." Over the following days, Elena and Marcus found themselves in an unprecedented situation. They were given access to alien technology and information systems, allowed to observe the true nature of Kepler 442b's ecosystem, and gradually introduced to concepts that challenged everything humanity thought it knew about the universe. The planet, they learned, was not naturally occurring. It had been constructed over millennia as a perfect testing environment, capable of supporting thousands of different life forms while monitoring their development and interaction patterns. The natural vegetation they had studied was actually a form of distributed biological computer, capable of complex calculations and environmental management on a planetary scale. "We're living inside an alien experiment," Marcus said one evening as they reviewed the day's revelations. "Everything we thought we knew about this place was wrong." Elena nodded, staring out at the alien landscape that now looked completely different to her trained eye. "The question is, what kind of experiment, and what happens when it's complete?" The answer came sooner than either of them expected. On their 7th day of contact with the alien civilization, new information appeared on their screens. The colony fleet from Earth was ahead of schedule. More concerning, it included a military component larger than originally planned. "Your species' response to the silence from this station has been illuminating," the message read. "Rather than patience or careful investigation, your governments have chosen to assume hostile action and respond with force. Admiral Harrison's task force includes nuclear weapons and planetary bombardment capabilities." Elena felt sick. "They think we're dead or captured. They're coming to rescue us or avenge us." "This acceleration of military response demonstrates the patterns we have observed in other aggressive species," the aliens explained. "When faced with uncertainty, humans default to violence as a solution. This tendency must be evaluated carefully." Marcus was studying the technical specifications that had appeared alongside the message. "Elena, look at this. They're not just monitoring the approaching fleet. They're analyzing human military doctrine, weapons capabilities, and tactical thinking patterns. The approaching conflict will serve as our final assessment of humanity's worthiness," the message continued. "If your species demonstrates wisdom, restraint, and the ability to recognize a superior civilization, accommodation may be possible. If they choose aggression despite obvious technological disadvantage, appropriate measures will be taken. Alina realized with growing horror that humanity was about to face its first truly decisive moment as a species. Everything would depend on choices that would be made by people who didn't even know the real situation they were walking into. "Can you give us more time?" she asked desperately. "Let us find a way to communicate with the fleet to explain what's really happening here." "Time is not the limiting factor," came the response. "Understanding is. Your species must demonstrate that it can recognize truth and adapt its behavior accordingly, even when that truth challenges fundamental assumptions about humanity's place in the universe." As Alina watched the alien sunset paint the constructed sky in impossible colors, she understood that the next 14 months would determine whether humanity joined the galactic community as partners or ceased to exist entirely. The weight of an entire species' future had come to rest on a research station orbiting an artificial world, in the hands of two scientists who were about to become the most important humans in history. The test had begun, and failure would mean more than just the end of human expansion into space. It would mean the end of human independence itself. Admiral Sarah Harrison stood before the holographic display in the command center of the UES Defiant, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she studied the tactical overview of the Kepler 442 system. 47 years of military service had taught her to read between the lines of intelligence reports, and what she saw didn't match what Earth Command was telling her. "Admiral, the quantum entanglement array is showing continued interference," reported Commander James Walsh, her chief communications officer. "We haven't received a single transmission from Research Station Kepler 442b in 8 weeks. That level of communication blackout suggests either total system failure or hostile action." Harrison nodded grimly. The New Horizon colonial fleet had been intended as a peaceful expansion mission, but the silence from the Advanced Research Station had forced Earth Command to transform it into something else entirely. What had begun as a colony mission was now a rescue operation with military priorities. "Status report on the fleet composition, Commander," she ordered. Walsh consulted his tactical display. 12 vessels total, Admiral. 3 colony ships carrying 50,000 civilians and prefabricated infrastructure, 2 heavy cruisers, 4 destroyers, 1 mobile command platform, 1 hospital ship, and 2 cargo vessels carrying terraforming equipment and emergency supplies. "And our non-standard cargo. Classified payload includes tactical nuclear devices, orbital bombardment systems, and experimental plasma weapons authorized for use against unknown threats," Walsh replied quietly. "Earth Command isn't taking chances with first contact scenarios." Harrison frowned. The weapons package troubled her, but she understood the reasoning. Humanity's first venture into deep space colonization couldn't be allowed to fail, especially not with 50,000 civilians depending on her decisions. Still, something about the whole situation felt wrong. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Chen from the sensor station, "we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. These readings are unlike anything in our databases." Harrison moved to the sensor console, studying the cascade of data that defied easy interpretation. "Are these signatures consistent with advanced technology?" "Yes, ma'am, but the power levels are beyond anything we thought possible. The energy output from the planet alone exceeds our theoretical maximum for fusion-based civilization by several orders of magnitude." The implications were sobering. If the research station had encountered a hostile alien civilization with technology that advanced, Dr. Vasquez and Dr. Chen were likely already dead. More concerning, humanity might be flying directly into a conflict it couldn't possibly win. "Commander Walsh, I want a private conference with the colony ship commanders," Harrison ordered. "We need to discuss contingency plans." An hour later, Harrison faced 3 experienced space captains via secure hologram link. Captain Rodriguez of the New Eden, Captain Okafor of the Unity, and Captain Petrov of the Endeavor had all volunteered for the colonial mission, believing they were leading their passengers to a new life among the stars. Now they were potentially flying into a war zone. "The situation has changed significantly," Harrison began without preamble. "Intelligence suggests we may be facing an unknown technological threat in the Kepler system. I'm recommending we establish a holding position at the system's edge while our military vessels conduct reconnaissance." Captain Rodriguez leaned forward, her dark eyes intense with concern. Admiral, my passengers have been in cryo-sleep for 6 months. Their life support systems are designed for a 12-month journey, not an extended delay in space. I understand the constraints, Harrison replied, but I won't risk 50,000 lives by charging blindly into an unknown situation. Captain Okafor, commanding the Unity, nodded thoughtfully. What kind of threat are we looking at, Admiral? Our colony ships have defensive capabilities, but they're not warships. That's what we need to determine, Harrison admitted. The energy signatures we're detecting suggest a civilization with technology centuries ahead of our own. If they're hostile, our conventional weapons may be ineffective. Captain Petrov, the eldest of the 3 colony commanders, stroked his gray beard as he considered the information. Admiral, I've been thinking about the communication blackout from the research station. Dr. Vasquez is one of the most competent scientists I've ever known. She wouldn't go silent without good reason. Harrison had been thinking the same thing. Alina Vasquez had been her roommate at the academy 25 years ago. They had maintained correspondence throughout their careers, and Harrison knew Alina's methodology better than most. The silence was completely out of character. There's another possibility we need to consider, Harrison said carefully. The research station might not have been destroyed. They might have been captured or are being held under some form of control. The implications hung heavy in the artificial air of the command center. A rescue mission was complicated enough, but attempting to extract personnel from technologically superior captors while protecting 50,000 civilians added layers of complexity that pushed their capabilities to the limit. Admiral, interrupted Lieutenant Chen's voice over the intercom, we're receiving a transmission from the Kepler system. It's coming from the research station. Harrison felt her heart rate spike, put it through to the main display. The hologram flickered and resolved into the familiar faces of Dr. Alina Vasquez and Dr. Marcus Chen. Both scientists appeared unharmed, though their expressions carried a weight that suggested they had experienced something profound and troubling. Admiral Harrison, Alina began, her voice carrying across the light years with surprising clarity, I'm relieved to see the fleet arrived safely. We have much to discuss before you proceed any further into the system. Dr. Vasquez, it's good to see you alive, Harrison replied, though she noticed Alina hadn't used their usual informal greeting. Something was definitely wrong. Please report your status. We've been concerned about the communication blackout. Alina's pause was meaningful. Admiral, we've made contact with the indigenous population of Kepler 442b. The situation is more complex than anyone anticipated. I need you to understand that this system is not uninhabited, and our presence here has implications far beyond what Earth Command considered. Harrison exchanged glances with her senior officers. Indigenous population implied a level of technological development that could support complex civilization. Dr. Vasquez, are you speaking freely? Are you under any form of duress? I'm speaking freely, Admiral, but I'm also speaking carefully. The civilization we've encountered has capabilities that render our military preparations irrelevant. Any attempt to use force in this system would result in catastrophic failure. Commander Walsh stepped forward. Dr. Vasquez, this is Commander Walsh. Can you provide specific information about the technological capabilities you've observed? Marcus Chen leaned into the transmission field. Commander, they've demonstrated the ability to monitor our communications across interstellar distances, manipulate planetary-scale environmental systems, and access our computer networks despite quantum encryption. Their technology appears to integrate biological and mechanical systems in ways we don't understand. Harrison felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's climate control. Dr. Chen, are you saying they've been monitoring Earth? Admiral, they've been monitoring human civilization for an extended period. They know about the colonial fleet, its composition, and its intended mission. They also know about the military contingency plans. The silence on the command deck was profound. If an alien civilization had been observing Earth without detection, it suggested surveillance capabilities that rendered human military security meaningless. Dr. Vasquez, Harrison said slowly, what do they want? Alina's image seemed to look directly through the transmission at Harrison. They want to determine whether humanity is ready for contact with the larger galactic community. Admiral, we're not the first species they've encountered. They've dealt with thousands of others, and the outcomes have varied considerably. Define varied considerably, Commander Walsh requested. Some species were granted autonomous existence within the galactic community, Marcus explained. Others were integrated into their collective consciousness to prevent them from becoming threats. Species that chose aggression were eliminated entirely. Harrison felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. Every decision she made in the next few hours could determine the future of human civilization. "What exactly are they expecting from us?" she asked. "A demonstration of wisdom and restraint," Alina replied. "Admiral, they know about the nuclear weapons and orbital bombardment systems. They're aware of Earth Command's contingency plans to establish human dominance in this system by force if necessary. They view these preparations as a test of human character." Captain Rodriguez's voice came through the conference link. "Admiral, are we looking at surrender or annihilation as our only options?" "Not exactly, Captain," Alina responded, having apparently heard the question. "They're offering us a chance to prove that humanity can recognize superior technology and adapt accordingly. But that adaptation requires abandoning our assumptions about human expansion and territorial control." Harrison began packing the command deck, her mind racing through tactical and strategic possibilities. Every instinct developed through decades of military service was telling her to prepare for conflict. But the rational part of her mind recognized that conventional military thinking was useless in this situation. "Dr. Vasquez, can you arrange direct communication between myself and their representatives?" "Admiral, they're already monitoring this conversation. If you wish to speak with them directly, you can do so immediately." Harrison straightened, assuming the formal bearing that had served her through countless diplomatic situations. "To the representatives of the Kepler 442 civilization, this is Admiral Sarah Harrison, commanding officer of the United Earth Fleet. I request formal communication to discuss the situation between our species." The response came immediately, text appearing on every screen throughout the fleet simultaneously. The demonstration of technological capability was clearly intentional. "Admiral Harrison, we greet you with curiosity and caution. Your species has reached a critical moment in its development. How you proceed will determine whether humanity joins the galactic community as a member species or faces consequences appropriate to the threat it represents." Harrison read the message twice before responding. "We come in peace, seeking to establish colonies for our growing population. We had no knowledge of your presence in this system. Your ignorance is understandable and not held against you. However, your response to discovering our existence will be evaluated carefully. The weapons systems you carry suggest preparation for conflict rather than peaceful coexistence." Commander Walsh leaned close to Harrison. "Admiral, they're trying to put us on the defensive. This feels like psychological warfare." Harrison nodded but continued the dialogue. "Our military escort is a precautionary measure. Human exploration missions have faced various threats in the past. We're prepared to modify our approach based on new information." "Modification is what we hope to see. Admiral Harrison, your species demonstrates remarkable adaptability and innovation. However, human history also shows patterns of aggression, territorial expansion, and inability to coexist peacefully with perceived competitors." The accusation stung because it was accurate. Human history was filled with conflicts driven by resource competition and territorial disputes. But Harrison also knew that same history included examples of remarkable cooperation and peaceful coexistence. "Our species has learned from its mistakes," she replied. "We're capable of peaceful coexistence when the situation demands it." "Capability and willingness are different qualities. We will observe your actions to determine which quality dominates human decision-making under stress." Harrison realized that every choice she made was being evaluated as a representation of human character. The pressure was immense, but she also recognized an opportunity. "What would you consider appropriate demonstration of peaceful intent?" "Abandon your military preparations. Approach our world with scientific and diplomatic vessels only. Accept that this system belongs to our civilization and that human presence here exists at our discretion." The demands were reasonable from their perspective, but politically impossible from Harrison's. Earth Command had invested enormous resources in this mission. The civilian population had sacrificed years of their lives for the promise of new homes among the stars. Returning with nothing would be seen as catastrophic failure. "I need time to consult with Earth Command and our civilian leadership," Harrison replied. "Time you have, wisdom remains to be demonstrated." The transmission ended, leaving Harrison alone with the most important decision in human history. Around her, the command staff waited for orders that would determine whether humanity's first steps into the larger universe would be its last. Commander Walsh established secure communication with Earth Command, priority Alpha protocols, and get me a private channel to the colony ship commanders. As her officers moved to carry out her orders, Harrison stared out at the stars and wondered if humanity was about to pass its greatest test or face its final judgment. The emergency session of the United Earth Security Council convened in the deep underground chambers beneath Geneva, where the most critical decisions in human history were made. President Chen Meilin called the session to order as representatives from every major nation and spacefaring organization took their seats around the circular table designed to emphasize equality among Earth's leadership. "We face an unprecedented situation," President Chen began, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Admiral Harrison's report confirms our worst fears about the Kepler 442 system. We are dealing with a technologically superior alien civilization that has been observing humanity for an unknown period." Defense Secretary Martinez leaned forward, his scarred hands folded on the polished table. "Madame President, our intelligence analysis suggests we're looking at a first contact scenario with beings whose capabilities exceed our theoretical maximums by several orders of magnitude. Their ability to monitor our communications across interstellar distances indicates technology centuries beyond our current understanding." Foreign Minister Singh raised her hand. "What are our options? Admiral Harrison's report suggests that conventional military action would be suicidal." "That's exactly the problem," replied General Thompson, chairman of the Joint Chiefs. 50,000 civilians are depending on our protection. We can't simply surrender our first colonial mission without exploring every alternative. President Chen activated the holographic display that dominated the center of the chamber. Admiral Harrison's face appeared, broadcasting from the edge of the Kepler system, where the human fleet waited for instructions. "Admiral, please update the Council on the current situation." Harrison's image flickered slightly due to the quantum entanglement communication lag, but her words came through clearly. "Madame President, the alien representatives have made their position clear. They view human presence in their system as a test of our species' ability to recognize superior authority and adapt accordingly." "And their specific demands?" asked Secretary Martinez. "Complete disarmament of our military escort and acceptance of their sovereignty over the Kepler system. They're offering us the opportunity to demonstrate peaceful intent through submission to their authority." The silence in the council chamber was profound. For a species that had spent millennia fighting for territory, resources, and independence, the concept of voluntary submission to alien authority challenged fundamental assumptions about human nature. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, director of the Human Expansion Initiative, spoke carefully. "Admiral, have they indicated what happens if we comply with their demands?" "Dr. Warren, they've mentioned the possibility of humanity being granted some form of autonomous existence within what they call the galactic community. However, the specifics of what that means remain unclear." Foreign Minister Singh stood, beginning to pace around the chamber. "We need to consider the precedent we're setting. If we submit to alien authority at the first sign of superior technology, we're essentially declaring that human independence only exists at the sufferance of more advanced civilizations." "And if we don't submit," countered General Thompson, "we're potentially condemning our entire species to extinction. Admiral Harrison's reports suggest these beings have dealt with thousands of other species. Most of them are no longer autonomous." President Chen raised her hand for silence. "Dr. Warren, what's the analysis from your xenosociology team?" Dr. Warren consulted her tablet before responding. "Madame President, we're dealing with what appears to be a highly advanced post-scarcity civilization that views itself as the dominant force in this region of the galaxy. Their pattern of behavior suggests they've developed a systematic approach to managing contact with emerging species." Managing, repeated Secretary Martinez. That's an interesting choice of words. It's accurate, Dr. Warren continued. From their perspective, we're not equals seeking peaceful coexistence. We're a potential problem that needs to be categorized and dealt with appropriately. The question is whether we can convince them to categorize us favorably. Admiral Harrison's image leaned forward. Madame President, there's something else the Council needs to know. Dr. Vasquez and Dr. Chen have been given access to alien technology and information systems. They're learning things about the nature of this civilization that Earth Command needs to understand. Explain, Admiral. The planet we intended to colonize isn't naturally occurring. It's an artificial construct designed as a testing ground for different species and civilizations. We've been observed and studied from the moment we entered the system. The revelation sent a wave of uncomfortable murmurs around the chamber. The idea that humanity had walked unknowingly into an alien laboratory was profoundly disturbing. Defense Secretary Martinez leaned back in his chair. Admiral, are you saying we're experimental subjects? In a sense, yes. But Dr. Vasquez believes we're also being evaluated for potential inclusion in their galactic community. The experiment is designed to test our adaptability and decision-making under pressure. President Chen considered the information carefully. As the first woman to lead the unified Earth government, she had reached her position through careful analysis and strategic thinking. This situation required both qualities in unprecedented measure. Admiral, what's your professional assessment of our military options? Harrison's expression grew grim. Madame President, conventional warfare would be futile. Their technology appears to operate on principles we don't understand. However, we do have some advantages they might not expect. Explain. Human adaptability and unpredictability. Dr. Vasquez reports that they've studied thousands of species, but each species follows relatively predictable patterns. Humans are harder to predict because we don't always make rational decisions. General Thompson leaned forward with interest. You're suggesting our irrationality might be an advantage. I'm suggesting that their evaluation system is based on observed patterns of behavior from other species. If we can demonstrate capabilities or decision-making processes they haven't encountered before, we might surprise them. Foreign Minister Singh stopped packing. Admiral, you're talking about using our unpredictability as a diplomatic tool. Exactly. They expect us to either submit immediately or choose aggression. If we can find a third option they haven't anticipated, we might be able to shift the dynamic of this interaction. Dr. Warren looked up from her tablet. Admiral, what kind of third option are you considering? Harrison paused, choosing her words carefully. Dr. Vasquez has been working on a proposal that demonstrates human value to their civilization without requiring submission or aggression. She believes we might be able to offer something they need rather than simply reacting to their demands. President Chen felt a spark of hope. Throughout her political career, she had succeeded by finding solutions that others missed, by identifying mutual benefit in seemingly adversarial situations. Admiral, I want you to work with Dr. Vasquez to develop this proposal. But I also want our military preparations to continue. We need options if diplomacy fails. Understood, Madame President. However, I should mention that they're monitoring our communications. They know about our military preparations and our diplomatic intentions. The reminder that privacy was impossible in this situation added another layer of complexity to their decision-making process. Every discussion, every plan, every contingency was potentially known to the alien observers. Secretary Martinez rubbed his temples. This is psychological warfare at its most sophisticated. They're forcing us to make decisions under conditions of complete transparency while maintaining complete opacity about their own intentions. Which brings us back to the fundamental question, said Foreign Minister Singh. Do we trust them to honor their agreements if we demonstrate the peaceful intent they're demanding? Dr. Warren looked up from her research. Foreign Minister, trust may not be the relevant concept. From their perspective, they're dealing with a species that hasn't yet proven its worthiness for galactic citizenship. They're not making agreements with equals. They're setting conditions for our continued existence. The harsh reality of their situation settled over the chamber like a weight. Humanity, for all its technological advancement and territorial expansion, was the junior partner in this relationship by several orders of magnitude. President Chen stood, drawing all attention to herself. We're going to try Admiral Harrison's third option. Dr. Vasquez and Dr. Chen have been in direct contact with this civilization for weeks. If anyone can find a path forward that preserves human dignity while acknowledging their superior capabilities, it's them. And if that fails, asked General Thompson. If that fails, General, we'll face that situation when we reach it. But I won't condemn 50,000 civilians to death or slavery without exhausting every possible alternative. Admiral Harrison nodded from the display. Madame President, there's one more factor the Council should consider. The alien representatives have indicated that this test isn't just about our fleet or our colonial mission. They're evaluating humanity as a species. Our decisions here will determine how they interact with Earth itself. The implications were staggering. The wrong choice could result in alien intervention in human affairs on a global scale. Earth's independence, not just the colonial mission, was at stake. Admiral, how long do we have to develop and present this alternative proposal? Dr. Vasquez estimates we have approximately 6 weeks before they require a final decision. After that point, they've indicated that continued delay will be interpreted as hostile intent. President Chen looked around the chamber at the faces of Earth's leadership. Each person present would bear responsibility for whatever decision emerged from their deliberations. 6 weeks to determine the future of human civilization, she said quietly. Ladies and gentlemen, we have work to do. As the council session continued, Admiral Harrison maintained her connection from the edge of an alien star system, watching the stars and wondering if humanity was about to take its first steps into a larger universe or its last steps as an independent species. The next 6 weeks would determine which future awaited them among the stars. The weight of an entire world's hopes and fears rested on decisions that would be made by a small group of humans in a laboratory on an artificial planet, light years from Earth. Dr. Vasquez and Dr. Chen had become humanity's most important ambassadors, whether they were prepared for that responsibility or not. Time was running out, and the universe was watching to see what humans would choose when faced with their own limitations. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in what had once been their modest research laboratory, but had transformed into something resembling a diplomatic embassy between species separated by hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. The alien technology that now filled the space operated on principles that challenged her understanding of physics, but she had learned to work with it through weeks of patient experimentation and careful observation. Marcus, are you ready for this? She asked, checking the translation interface they had developed with alien assistants. The device could communicate concepts that had no human equivalents, translating not just language but entire frameworks of thought. Dr. Marcus Chen nodded from his position at the quantum communication array. The connection to Admiral Harrison is stable, and our alien contacts are monitoring. Elena, if this proposal doesn't work, I don't see any other options for peaceful resolution. Elena took a deep breath, centering herself for what might be the most important presentation in human history. Over the past weeks, she had come to understand that the alien civilization, which called itself the Convergence, operated according to principles that were both logical and utterly foreign to human thinking. Admiral Harrison, President Chen, members of the Earth Security Council, she began, addressing the quantum communication link that connected her to Earth's leadership. I'm ready to present the proposal that Dr. Chen and I have developed in consultation with Convergence representatives. Admiral Harrison's voice came through clearly despite the impossible distance. Dr. Vasquez, the Council is assembled and ready to hear your recommendations. Elena activated the holographic display that showed a three-dimensional representation of the galaxy, with thousands of points of light representing worlds controlled by the Convergence. What we're dealing with isn't just a technologically advanced civilization. The Convergence is a galactic-scale collective intelligence that has been managing the development of intelligent species for nearly 1,000,000 years. President Chen's voice carried across the light years. Dr. Vasquez, please explain what you mean by managing development. Madame President, the Convergence doesn't view itself as conquerors or rulers. They see themselves as gardeners, cultivating intelligence throughout the galaxy and guiding species toward what they consider optimal development. Marcus stepped forward, his face serious. The key insight is that they don't want to destroy or dominate other species. They want to integrate them into a galactic community that operates according to principles of collective benefit rather than individual advantage. Alina continued the explanation. Every species they encounter is evaluated based on its potential contribution to galactic civilization. Species that demonstrate useful capabilities and the ability to cooperate are granted autonomy within the larger system. Species that prove too aggressive or destructive are either reformed or eliminated. And which category do they believe humanity falls into? Asked Defense Secretary Martinez. That's what they're still determining, Alina replied. Our technological innovation and adaptability impress them, but our history of conflict and resource competition concerns them deeply. Admiral Harrison's image appeared on the holographic display. Dr. Vasquez, what are you proposing? Alina activated a new section of the display, showing detailed analyses of human capabilities that she and Marcus had compiled. Admiral, we're proposing that humanity offer something the Convergence needs, a unique perspective on problem-solving and adaptation that could benefit their entire galactic network. Explain, came President Chen's voice. Marcus took over the presentation. The Convergence has achieved remarkable stability and efficiency, but they've also identified limitations in their approach. Species that are integrated into their collective lose some of their innovative capacity. They gain incredible technological capabilities, but they become less creative, less unpredictable. And they see human unpredictability as valuable, asked Foreign Minister Singh. More than valuable, Alina replied. Essential. They've encountered problems that their systematic approach can't solve. Complex multi-species conflicts, technological challenges that require unconventional thinking, exploration of dangerous or unstable regions of space. Alina brought up specific examples on the display. There are areas of the galaxy where standard convergence protocols fail. Regions with unusual physical laws, encounters with completely alien forms of intelligence, situations that require the kind of adaptive thinking that humans excel at. Admiral Harrison leaned forward in her transmission. Dr. Vasquez, are you suggesting we become troubleshooters for an alien empire? Not troubleshooters, Admiral, partners. The Convergence is offering humanity a unique position within their galactic community. We would maintain our autonomy and cultural identity while providing services that no other species can offer. Marcus activated another section of the display. They're willing to provide us with advanced technology, access to other worlds suitable for human habitation, and protection from other galactic threats. In exchange, we would serve as their specialists for situations requiring human-style innovation and adaptability. The silence from Earth stretched for several minutes as the leadership considered the implications. Alina waited nervously, knowing that human pride might make this offer difficult to accept. Dr. Vasquez, came General Thompson's voice. This sounds like we're being asked to become mercenaries for an alien civilization. General, I understand why it might seem that way, Alina replied carefully. But consider the alternative. If we refuse this offer and choose military resistance, we face extinction. If we submit completely, we lose our independence. This proposal gives us a path to survival and growth while maintaining what makes us uniquely human. President Chen's voice carried a note of thoughtful consideration. Dr. Vasquez, what guarantees do we have that they'll honor this agreement? Madame President, the Convergence has existed for hundreds of thousands of years. Their entire civilization is built on long-term thinking and systematic cooperation. Breaking agreements would undermine the stability they've spent millennia building. Alina brought up the final section of her presentation. More importantly, they need us to remain genuinely human to be useful to them. If they altered our fundamental nature, we would lose the very qualities they value. Marcus added, we've been shown examples of other species that have similar arrangements with the Convergence. They maintain their own governments, their own cultures, their own territories, but they're part of a larger galactic community that provides mutual support and protection. Admiral Harrison studied the information displayed before her. Dr. Vasquez, what would this mean for our immediate situation? The 50,000 colonists who came here expecting to build new lives. Admiral, they would still build new lives, just not in the way they originally envisioned. The convergence is offering us access to multiple worlds suitable for human habitation. Our people could establish colonies throughout their territory, not just in this single system. Elena activated a star chart showing dozens of worlds marked for potential human settlement. These planets have been prepared for various species over the millennia. Many are uninhabited and available for human colonization. Others already host multiple species in cooperative communities. Multi-species colonies? Asked Dr. Warren from Earth. Some of them, yes, Marcus replied. It's another aspect of convergence philosophy. They believe that diverse communities are more stable and innovative than single-species settlements. The concept challenged human assumptions about territorial control and cultural preservation, but Alina could see the potential benefits. Exposure to other civilizations would accelerate human development in ways that isolation never could. Dr. Vasquez, came President Chen's voice, I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you believe this is the best option for humanity? Elena considered the question carefully. Madame President, I believe it's the only viable option that preserves human independence and allows for continued growth. The alternative is either extinction or complete absorption into an alien collective. And you trust these beings to honor their commitments. I trust their self-interest, Elena replied. We're more valuable to them as autonomous partners than as subjects or corpses. Their entire proposal is based on utilizing our unique capabilities. Admiral Harrison's voice carried a note of military pragmatism. Dr. Vasquez, what would be our role in conflicts between the convergence and other galactic powers? Admiral, that's been a key point in our negotiations. Humans would not be required to participate in aggressive military actions. Our role would be primarily defensive, exploratory, and problem-solving. We would help protect convergence territory and member species, but we wouldn't be asked to conquer other civilizations. Marcus brought up tactical displays showing convergence military doctrine. Their approach to conflict is fundamentally different from human warfare. They prefer integration and conversion over destruction. Most conflicts are resolved through technological superiority and diplomatic pressure rather than direct violence. So we would be joining a defensive alliance rather than an aggressive empire? Asked Foreign Minister Singh. Essentially, yes, Elena confirmed. The convergence has few external enemies because most species either join willingly or are neutralized before they become threats. Large-scale warfare is rare because the technological gap makes resistance futile for most civilizations. The conversation continued for another hour, with Earth's leadership asking detailed questions about every aspect of the proposal. Elena and Marcus answered as completely as possible, drawing on weeks of intensive communication with convergence representatives. Finally, President Chen called for a recess to allow the Earth Security Council to deliberate privately. Elena found herself alone with Marcus and their alien technology in a laboratory that had become the center of humanity's first diplomatic relationship with another species. Do you think they'll accept? Marcus asked, exhaustion evident in his voice. I think they have to, Elena replied. The alternative is too terrible to contemplate. Outside their laboratory windows, the alien sunset painted the artificial sky in impossible colors, a daily reminder that humanity had ventured far beyond the comfortable boundaries of Earth. Whether they would find a place among the stars or disappear into the vast darkness depended on decisions being made in distant chambers beneath the mountains of Earth. The next few hours would determine whether humanity took its first steps into a larger universe as an independent species or faced consequences that no human had ever imagined. Elena and Marcus could only wait and hope that human wisdom would prove sufficient for the challenges that lay ahead among the stars. The decision came 18 hours after the Earth Security Council's deliberation ended. President Chen's voice carried across the impossible distance between worlds with the weight of humanity's future in every word. Dr. Vasquez, Dr. Chen, Admiral Harrison, she began, her tone formal but tinged with something Elena had never heard from Earth's most powerful leader, uncertainty. The United Earth government has reached a decision regarding the convergence proposal. Elena felt her heart racing as she stood in the transformed laboratory that had become humanity's first embassy to an alien civilization. Beside her, Marcus gripped the edge of their workstation, his knuckles white with tension. After extensive consultation with our military, scientific, and diplomatic leadership, President Chen continued, we have decided to accept the convergence offer with specific conditions and reservations. Elena felt a wave of relief so profound it made her knees weak. Marcus let out a breath he had been holding for what seemed like hours. However, President Chen added, we require certain guarantees and clarifications before we can proceed with formal acceptance. Elena activated the translation interface, knowing that the convergence representatives were monitoring every word of the conversation. Madame President, what specific conditions does Earth require? First, we need written guarantees that human colonies will maintain their cultural autonomy and governmental independence within the convergence framework. Second, we require the right to withdraw from our arrangement if circumstances change. Third, we want assurance that humans will never be asked to act against other human settlements or Earth itself. Elena translated the conditions into the complex symbolic language the convergence used for formal negotiations. The response came within minutes, appearing on every screen in the laboratory. The conditions proposed by humanity are acceptable with modifications, the message read. Cultural and governmental autonomy will be preserved within the parameters of galactic law. Withdrawal from our arrangement is possible, but would result in termination of technological support and protection. Humans will never be required to act against other humans, though conflicts between human settlements will be subject to convergence arbitration. Admiral Harrison's voice joined the conversation from the fleet's position at the edge of the system. Dr. Vasquez, can you clarify what they mean by galactic law? Elena consulted the information systems that had been made available to her during weeks of intensive study. Admiral, galactic law consists primarily of restrictions on actions that could destabilize interstellar civilization. Prohibitions against certain weapons, restrictions on environmental destruction, requirements for peaceful resolution of disputes between member species. Marcus added, from what we've learned, the restrictions are similar to international law on Earth, but with enforcement capabilities that make violations practically impossible. President Chen's voice carried a note of concern. Dr. Vasquez, what happens to Earth if we accept this arrangement? Do they require our homeworld to be integrated into their territory? Elena translated the question and waited for the response. Earth will remain under human control, but will be subject to convergence monitoring and protection. No convergence installations will be established on Earth without human consent, but they reserve the right to intervene if Earth-based activities threaten galactic stability. And what constitutes a threat to galactic stability? Asked Defense Secretary Martinez. The answer appeared immediately. Development of certain categories of weapons, initiation of aggressive expansion against other member species, or actions that could damage the fabric of spacetime itself. Elena realized that humanity was essentially being offered membership in a galactic community with rules designed to prevent the kind of conflicts that had plagued Earth throughout its history. The restrictions seemed reasonable, even beneficial, from the perspective of long-term stability. Madame President, Elena said, I believe these terms represent the best possible outcome for humanity. We maintain our independence while gaining access to technology and protection that would otherwise be impossible. Admiral Harrison's image appeared on the holographic display. Dr. Vasquez, there's something I need to ask. What happens to our current military capabilities? The fleet is carrying weapons that might violate these galactic laws. Elena translated the question and received an immediate response. Weapons currently carried by human forces are primitive by galactic standards and pose no threat to civilized worlds. However, certain categories of weapons must be surrendered or modified before human vessels are permitted to travel freely within convergence territory. Which weapons? Admiral Harrison asked. Nuclear devices designed for planetary bombardment, and any weapons specifically designed to cause environmental destruction on inhabited worlds. Elena realized that the convergence was essentially asking humanity to abandon its capacity for planetary genocide, while allowing defensive and conventional military capabilities to remain. The restrictions seemed designed to prevent large-scale atrocities rather than to disarm humanity entirely. Admiral, Elena said, they're not asking us to surrender our ability to defend ourselves. They're asking us to abandon weapons that could destroy entire civilizations. Marcus brought up technical specifications on their display. Admiral, they're offering to provide defensive technologies that would make our current weapons obsolete anyway. Energy shields, automated defense systems, medical technology that could prevent most combat casualties. President Chen's voice cut through the technical discussion. Dr. Vasquez, I need your honest assessment. Do you believe humanity can thrive under these conditions? Alina considered everything she had learned during her weeks of intensive contact with the Convergence. Madame President, I believe humanity can not only survive but flourish. We're being offered opportunities that no human ever imagined. Access to worlds throughout the galaxy, technology that could solve most of our resource and environmental problems, and partnerships with civilizations that have experience we can't even comprehend. And the cost? Acknowledgement that we're not alone in the universe and acceptance that our expansion into space will be guided by principles designed to prevent galactic war. The silence that followed stretched for several minutes. Alina knew that Earth's leadership was grappling with concepts that challenged fundamental assumptions about human independence and territorial sovereignty. Finally, President Chen spoke again. Dr. Vasquez, please inform the Convergence that humanity accepts their proposal under the conditions they have specified. We are ready to begin the integration process. Alina felt a mixture of relief, excitement, and profound uncertainty as she translated humanity's acceptance into the formal protocols required by Convergence diplomatic procedure. The response came immediately. Humanity's acceptance is acknowledged and welcomed. Integration protocols will begin immediately. Admiral Harrison's fleet will be escorted to designated facilities for technological upgrades and cultural orientation. Earth will receive its first Convergence diplomatic mission within 1 solar month. Admiral Harrison's voice carried a note of military caution. Dr. Vasquez, what can the fleet expect during these integration protocols? Admiral, they're offering to upgrade your ships with Convergence technology, provide advanced medical treatment for any crew members who need it, and begin the process of teaching human personnel to operate within galactic civilization. Marcus added, the 50,000 colonists will be given the choice of remaining together as a single settlement or spreading out across multiple worlds within Convergence territory. They'll have access to planets that are better suited for human habitation than anything we had expected to find. Over the following days, Alina and Marcus watched as humanity took its first steps into a larger universe. The colonial fleet was guided to a massive facility that existed in the space between dimensions, where human technology was upgraded with capabilities that seemed like magic to Alina's scientific training. The colonists themselves adapted to their new situation with the resilience that had carried humanity across Earth's continents and into space. They formed committees, elected representatives, and began making plans for settlements on worlds that offered opportunities beyond anything they had imagined when they left Earth. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in how humans began to see themselves. No longer the dominant species in a universe that existed for their expansion, they became students in a galactic classroom where wisdom was measured in millions of years and success was defined by cooperation rather than conquest. Alina stood once again at the observation deck of the research station, but now the view was different. Instead of an alien world that humanity intended to claim, she saw a carefully maintained environment where multiple species learned to coexist and thrive. In the distance, she could see the lights of the human settlement that was taking shape under Convergence guidance. Do you think we made the right choice? Marcus asked, joining her at the observation port. Alina watched as human children played alongside the offspring of 3 other species in the settlement's central park. I think we made the only choice that preserved what makes us human while allowing us to become something more. Above them, the stars shone with a different light now. No longer distant points of potential conquest, they were neighborhoods in a galactic community that humanity was just beginning to explore. The fear that had driven human expansion across space had been replaced by wonder at the possibilities that lay ahead. Humanity had stepped away from the precipice of galactic war and chosen a different path among the stars. Whether they would thrive as partners in a larger civilization remained to be seen, but they had been given the chance to try. The universe was vast, ancient, and full of wonders that humans were only beginning to understand. But for the first time in human history, They were not alone in exploring it. Alina smiled as she watched the sunset paint the artificial sky in impossible colors, knowing that tomorrow would bring challenges and opportunities that no human had ever imagined. The stars were calling, and humanity had finally learned to listen.